Everybody, I'm back. Today I want to talk about the Florida State offensive line. That's going to be a very important part of football. One of the more underrated aspects of college football and football in general is the play in the trenches. And, you hear that. It's become kind of a cliche to say that now, but it's still so true because if your quarterback doesn't have enough time to throw the ball, there's no success. If your running back doesn't have the holes to, get yards, there's no success. You need a good trench play on the offensive line to play well. And even on the defensive line, you need it, for your cornerbacks to not have to cover receivers all day long, to eat up blocks so your linebackers can get to the ball carrier. The line play dictates a lot. So today I'm going to talk about the offensive line. That's mainly because the offensive line for Florida State has been a struggle the last couple of years. 15, it was bad. Last year, they had struggles. And this year is going to be interesting because starting out, they already lost two starters to the NFL, and a couple guys were injured this spring. But I'm going to get into that. So I'll just jump right into it. So first of all, Florida State lost their starting left tackle from last year, Rod Johnson, went off to the NFL, and also they lost Kareem Ari. I'm assuming that's how you say his last name. Haven't heard it, so Florida State fans, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But he was the starting left guard. Both of them are off to the NFL. And even with those guys, the line still didn't live up to the potential. Going into last year, you had different people saying, it was so much depth. They had a lot of guys. They had a lot of bodies, unlike they've had in recent years. So they had a lot of players to kind of plug in. So people thought the offensive line was going to be really, really good. They had a lot more struggles than anticipated. Don't have to say they did. So losing two guys doesn't help that situation. And not only that, this spring, the first team center, Alec Eberle, I believe that's how you say his name, he was out with a hip injury. So they had to work the backup center. They had three guys kind of working at the center position while Eberle was out. And not only was Eberle out, the first team right guard, Landon Dickerson, was also out this spring with an ACL injury. So they had to really get some guys to work in those guard positions. Now, one encouraging sign, or not encouraging, depending on how you view the situation that I'm going to describe, is that Rick Leonard is coming back. Last year, I believe he played. Yeah, he played right tackle, and he he was not injured this spring, so that was a good sign. A returning player not injured. He played right tackle last year after moving from defensive end, so he was a raw guy. He came from the defensive side of the ball and moved to the offensive line. So he had to learn how to play tackle for college. Unfortunately for him, though, he was benched after the Louisville game because of his play. But then he started again during the Boston College game. I'm assuming because they were inconsistent at the guard position. And then he started the final three games of the season as well. So he's inconsistent, and he could do either the left or right side. But more on that later because he may not even be starting this year. So this is going to be a really interesting situation. And that's mainly because Brock Rubel has been ahead of Leonard all spring on the depth chart. He's been starting ahead of him at that right tackle position. And that may have you guys wondering, well, he's going to move to left tackle. Not so, because there's another guy I'm going to talk about who's at left tackle. So Leonard, the returning guy with some experience, is actually behind Brock Rubel and this other guy that I'm going to talk about. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing for FSU. We're going to find out. Now, you also have Cole Minshew and Wilson Bell. They were working at the guard positions in the absence of Dickerson. I think it was last year when they were injured. So when now that Dickerson's gone, and I think during times last year they had injuries across this offensive line. They dealt with injuries. These guys got to come in and play a little bit, so they got a little bit of work. Minshew played both positions last year. He played left and right guard as they were kind of working through that injury situation and trying to, get some guys up to snuff in the middle of the season, which is really hard to do. You have to have chemistry on the offensive line. So Cole Minshew is a guy who was probably in the running to get to work for that left guard position. And they also had another guy named Derek Kelly who played guard last year as well. But he struggled when he got in, and he had a knee injury back in 2015 that honestly may have played a part in some of his struggles. So we'll see how that works out, see how he develops and whether he can come in and take some positions there. And so since I mentioned Eberle, since Eberle is out at the center position, there's three guys who were competing during the spring for his for that position while he's out, and maybe even unseating him if he comes back and is not able to play as well. But you had Boselli, but unfortunately Boselli was out all spring because he got injured as well. But he was the backup a few times last year, so the guy who was kind of like one of the top backups for the center position was out this spring, so that left you with two other guys. You had Martinez, who started the first three games of 2015 at the center position, but he's never started since, but he's played in a little mop-up duty since then. And then you have the #1 overall center recruit from the 2016 cycle, who I believe is Bavion Johnson. I believe that's how you say his name. But he's the #1 overall center recruit. And if I'm not mistaken, according to some of the reports I read, Bavion Johnson stepped in at center for the spring. So he was the one who kind of took all the starting reps for that center position as the spring kind of moved along. And so what I'm seeing is like it's a bunch of injuries, injuries, which has affected Florida State a lot in terms of their production on the field. Um, Josh Ball, who's a redshirt freshman, I told you I was going to talk about him. He started at left tackle all spring until he got injured for a little bit, but he came back. He wasn't injured the whole time. But Josh Ball, so instead of Leonard getting some work at left tackle, Josh Ball, the redshirt freshman, has been getting work at left tackle. So if you follow, the right tackle from last year, Rick Leonard, has been demoted. Brock Rubel has stepped ahead of him at right tackle, and Josh Ball, the redshirt freshman, has stepped ahead at left tackle. And so that shows you kind of like the shift, and they're trying to get guys to move around and see who plays the best. And another note here is that guy Derek Kelly I was talking about, he also got injured a bit during the springtime, so he hasn't been able to step in at guard as much. And that led to the Florida State staff inputting Ethan Frith, I believe that's how you say his name, in at guard. And they said he did okay at guard this spring. So Ethan Frith was the backup tackle last year. So you're seeing a bit of shuffling here in the offensive line. It's a little cryptic when you hear coaches talk about the offensive line because you don't know if they really mean what they're saying when guys are playing well or if they're progressing or what exactly that means. So from what I've seen so far, I would assume this is the depth chart or this is the starting line for Florida State's offensive line. They have Josh Ball at left tackle. They kind of got like a shady gray area at left guard with Frith and Minshew and Bell, all those guys kind of working out together, trying to figure out how to get in there. The center is Bavion Johnson until, Alec Eberle comes back. And maybe not. If he's still too injured to play, it will be Bavion Johnson most likely. The right guard, I believe, is probably Cole Minshew at this point. I think he's probably solidified one of the guard spots, maybe. And then you have Brock Rubel at right tackle. And Ethan Frith probably is like, you can probably slot him in that left guard spot for now just to have somebody's name in there. And so with that said, Florida State is looking to get a lot of good production out of these guys and hoping that they can keep DeAndre Francois upright and have a better season than they've had in the previous years. Now, this is the interesting thing to me. When I see this, when I see guys moving down the depth chart and not producing as much as you would think they would, even though they have experience, that seems to indicate to me that the offensive line is not developing as well as Florida State would like them to. And some of that has gone on players, but some of that I believe also has to go on the offensive line coach, who is Rick Trickett, who I'm going to do a video on because, when it comes to offensive line play, the coach is very important. Many of you know, if you watch my videos, I wasn't a big fan of Mario Cristobal at Alabama because I felt like the tackles weren't playing well. The offensive line wasn't playing well under him. So I was kind of happy to see him go, even though his recruiting was very well welcomed. But his coaching on the offensive line, I really wasn't a big fan of it. And so I'm wondering if Rick Trickett deserves a big share to blame for the offensive line. Florida State fans, I want to know what you think. Let me know if you think I'm wrong. Let me know if you think that the offensive line is not big of a deal as I think it is, or tell me your thoughts on Rick Trickett and tell me who you think will be the starting 5 offensive linemen. Let me know if I'm completely off track or maybe I got some of these guys right. But either way, I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say. See you for the next video. I'll try to make it about Rick Trickett. We'll see. Until then.